Welcome to Horror Year, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you're brave enough to face your darkest fears and uncover the most chilling tales, you've come to the right place. So, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and subscribe to Horror Year. Your journey into terror begins now. In the bleak, snow-covered expanse of Siberia, where winter's grip was unrelenting, a remote Soviet laboratory harbored a chilling secret. The year was 1947, and within its isolated confines, a sinister experiment awaited, one designed to test the very limits of human endurance. Under the guise of a sleep study, 5 political prisoners were condemned to an unending nightmare, their fates sealed by the cold and darkness of the Siberian wilderness. A secret Soviet laboratory hidden in the isolated outskirts of a dismal town pulsed with a frenetic energy in the middle of winter, when snow coated the forests of Siberia. In 1947, the Cold War loomed large over all facets of society. The goal of the lab was to push the limits of psychological toughness and human endurance. Here was to be the scene of a macabre experiment that would become the stuff of nightmares. In theory, the experiment was straightforward: find the maximum amount of sleep deprivation. 5 political prisoners were kidnapped by the scientists, who falsely claimed to be conducting a sleep study in exchange for their participation. The subjects had consented, desperate and dejected, not realizing the horrors that would soon befall them. The cells the inmates were kept in were austere, windowless spaces. There was an odd equipment in the room. It was a set of metallic sensors to track heart rate and brain activity. Long shadows that seemed to wriggle and move were cast by an unsettling dark light that flickered overhead. First few days passed without incident. The detainees, already exhausted, started to exhibit signs of exhaustion. Their minds were cloudy, their bodies hurt, and hallucinations started to permeate their world. It was harmless at first, strange shadows and murmurs in the dark. However, the hallucinations eventually took on a darker tone. Things quickly got worse as the days stretched into weeks. After being denied sleep, the inmates' minds began to disintegrate. Their once coherent discussions devolved into meaningless babble. They told tales of hideous beings that lurked just beyond the light, their eyes wide with fear as though they saw something that the others were blind to. They started to mistrust one another as paranoia set in, and their once fun friendship turned into fury and mistrust. The inmates became insane one by one. Their skin turned pale, eyes sunk, and bodies grew emaciated. They started having severe delusions. A prisoner reported seeing a dark, changing monster that appeared to feed on their collective anxiety, while another claimed to be being pursued by shadowy beings whispering his name. The distinction between a nightmare and reality became hazy. The scientists, who had been aloof and clinical in their views at first, became more and more alarmed by the quickening decline. They had anticipated fatigue, but not the violent tantrums and psychotic episodes that the participants started experiencing. Their notes turned panicked with desperate scrawls and menacing warnings. Still, they persisted in their task, propelled by a sinister fascination. The chamber was silent one awful night. As the scientists peered through the observation windows, they saw something quite unsettling. The inmates had halted their frantic screaming and endless pacing. Rather, they occupied a circle seat, their eyes lifeless and soulless. The gentle murmurs that appeared to come from nowhere broke the eerie silence in the room, and then, just like that, the silence broke. With a fervor that defied description, the convicts attacked each other, erupting into terrible anarchy. The subjects turned on one another in a mindless, animalistic anger that the scientists witnessed in terror. The chamber was a picture of utter cruelty and hopelessness. Following the incident, the scientists, who were now shook and traumatized, made a terrible choice. To recover the remaining detainees, they went into the room. The once organized lab had devolved into a macabre exhibition of mental illness and human misery. The faces of the wounded bodies were contorted into hideous horror expressions. Fearing the experiment's results, the Soviet authorities locked the lab and destroyed all study documentation. The experiment's scientists are still unidentified, and it is unclear what became of them. The facility was deserted and allowed to deteriorate amid the Siberian tundra.